Good evening, everyone. With a quorum of members present, I'll call the Finance Committee for Tuesday, February 27th to order. The first item of business on our agenda is the minutes of our previous two meetings, 1:23 of '24 and 2:13 of '24, copies of which were in the packets. Did anyone note any revisions or adjustments they need for the minutes? If not, I'll take a motion to approve both sets. Motion from Watson, is there a second? Second from Lukens. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. The minutes are approved. Item number 2 is discussion and possible action approving a supplemental site investigation PFAS assessment for the 1300 Cleveland Avenue property. That file number is WDNR BRRT hashtag 2-37-587081. You've got the report in your packets that looks like we had requested some additional site testing there. And it looks like the financial proposal for that testing and monitoring, it looks like it's starting out about $46,500. So they're looking for money for that. We have the Public Works Director with us. Does anyone have questions on that? I know we've talked through that site a couple times, and, you know, we talked through the fact that there's a limitation to how far out of a radius you want to keep testing, but there's also value in knowing what all is there in the immediate area, right? So did anyone have questions for Eric on the testing or the testing plan? Doug?
So this is the testing consultation plan. Maybe Eric can describe exactly what this
Yep.
is getting us.
Yeah, this is actually going to get some off-site testing done that are beyond the limits of 1300 Cleveland Avenue. Yeah, so, and this will really be the start, and then depending on what those test results come back at, there may be additional monitoring wells and other testing, as we move forward.
Thank you.
Okay. Additional questions or comment on that project? If not, is there a motion to approve that project? Motion from Denny, is there a second? Second by Lukens. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That motion is carried. Motion carries. Item 3 is discussion and possible action on local share funding for buses funded by VW mitigation settlement. And you'll recall, a few years ago, as part of the VW mitigation settlement, we were applying for some bus replacements that we would have been entitled to under that settlement. We also, if there's any questions for the transit department, we have Megan available on WebEx, but her video is not working. But she can hear us, and we can hear her if you have specific questions for her. But this actually would be another go-round of that funding from the looks of it. And we certainly would have the ability to apply for those again. As before, the local share is a phased drawdown, right? Not all at once, it sounded
Right.
like, for the payment part.
It's through shared revenue reduction over 10 years. And then they will fund a base bus. And then if there's any enhancements that we want, that would also have to be funded by the city. We did meet with our FTA, the federal grant liaison person, on Thursday, and he thought that that could be covered by some CARES grant money we have
Okay.
for transit, so that would reduce our local share as well, because this money is not coming from federal or state grant money
It's
per se.
settlement funding.
It's
Sure.
settlement funding. So
Okay.
then that would help us fund that upcharge for any bus enhancements that we want.
Sure. Okay. And so this really is to approve the application.
Yes.
Megan, did you have anything on behalf of Transit that you wanted to add other than taking questions today?
I don't have the packet in front of me, but I'd just like to add that we have 10 buses that qualify
Yep.
for replacement under this program.
Okay.
And I think from Megan's conversation, most communities do not have buses as old as we are, ours are, and so there probably won't be a lot of other communities that have eligible requests, so we likely will get the funds.
That would be a blessing. So
Yes.
sometimes having some antiquated things turns out to be an advantage, I guess. So, I mean, we've struggled even to find used buses that we could use for our own purposes. So this would be helpful if we could secure that funding. Michael?
Well, then if we've got 10 eligible buses, does that mean then the and we have 24 transit buses total. Does that mean if we get this settlement funding, most of our fleet will be reasonably up to date?
Yes, we right now, so we received 7 buses in 2022. So if we are replacing these, some of our, we have 2011 buses that don't qualify for replacement under this program. And I believe that there's a couple buses that we acquired used from Duluth that are not outside of their, well, they may be outside of their useful life, but don't qualify under this program.
Sure. But the majority of the fleet would be in way better shape, it
Yeah.
sounds like.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Anything else?
Oh,
Go ahead,
and
Doug.
just that the local share on that base bus is 10%.
Okay.
In the past, we've had issues trying to get grant money because there are stipulations on what kind of buses we can use and whether it's a combustion fuel or it's electric or something like that. Do we foresee any hiccups with that regard?
Not through this grant program. Those are competitive grants where we have a hard time getting chosen for grant money for those grants because government funds are really looking towards doing alternate fuel buses, and we just aren't equipped for that right now. That's not the case with the VW settlement.
Thank you.
Okay. Perfect. Do we have a motion then to approve the grant application? Motion from Martins, is there a second? Second from Watson. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. Item number 4 is discussion and possible action on purchase of dash-mounted police radar units. And you'll see, you've got a memo from Chief Barnes in your packets. Obviously, there's no shortage of speeding complaints within the neighborhoods. I think neighborhood groups, every time we all go to one, that's one of the number one things citizens are concerned about. So, Chief, if you want to just walk us through the request?
Yeah, this was actually, shame on me, came as a surprise. I might have complained about not enough speeding tickets, and then an officer said, well, if we had working radar units, and then we put a officer on light duty, and we're like, go look at all the squads and figure out what's going on. And we found that 14 or 15 of the 23 squad cars and their mounted radar units were inoperable. They don't make parts for those anymore, and the ones that are still working are the same age as the ones that aren't working. So it made sense to us to look at potential funding options. This could be a CIP request at some point. We would have to then wait to replace these, or the potential to use the ARPA dollars that we want to get allocated by the end of this year. And so anytime we go to a citizen group or we think, what are all these horrible things that could be going on in Wausau that are important to you, the community says, you need to get the speeders on our road. That's always the number one complaint or thing that our community wants us to address. So this is standard operating equipment in a squad car, and I was unaware that they weren't functioning, and seeing the ARPA opportunity right now and knowing that if we can put new radars in all of our squads, our officers are going to utilize them, and that improves safety of our communities. The more traffic and speed reduction we do, the less crashes. There's a direct correlation between those things. So you'll see that there's 2 different acceptable mounted radar units and their estimates that are provided in there.
Sure.
But we wanted to propose this initially as a potential ARPA option for the council to consider. If that's not something that suits you at this point, it's something we would definitely have to bring back as a CIP request. And I just am unaware of a modern police department that doesn't have mounted radars in their squad cars. So unfortunately, it caught us by surprise, but as soon as we became aware of that, we're bringing that to you, and we're seeking your support.
I think we can rank it and score it for our next meeting, as we do with any ARPA request. I do think that it is, at least on the community-facing end, seemingly a better request for CIP, only because it's equipment replacement. And I guess what I'd like to see here is, since the radar unit is a functioning part of the police car, much like the mobile data terminal, the radio, the lights, all of those instruments that are in the vehicle, this is part of the vehicle too, and I would like to see these units become part of the upfitting contract. So when they upfit a new squad car, either testing and calibration of the old radar unit, move it over to the new car, or if it's not working, get a new one at the time those cars are upfitted and issued. I think that's going to be an ongoing cyclical expense, just like any other police equipment that they need to get the job done. And so I would like to see that, and of course, that contract, that those vehicles are motor pool. And so, I mean, that's part of the car, just like we decided that the cot in the ambulance is part of the ambulance. When you buy the ambulance, you don't buy the cot separate. So, if we elect to, whether through this or through CIP, solve this problem now, I think as we go forward, every time a new car gets ordered or a few new cars get ordered in cycle, if we have radar units we can move over, then move them over. But if we don't, I think that should be part of the upfit because it's part of the technology of the car.
I think a couple of things that I would acknowledge. Hearing you say that, it really makes me feel like I wish I had a conversation with Solomon before coming up here. Not fair to him, so sorry, Saul. But two is that our average radar unit lasts 3 to 4 squad cars. So it's, there's a component of that makes sense to me, that if that's something we just never have to worry about again. But again, I was very shocked to find out that more than 50% of our squad cars don't have a functioning radar unit in it.
Sure.
And really, I mean, we looked historically, motor pool we aren't generating enough revenues to keep up with replacement, so it's not as if putting it to motor pool doesn't really solve a financial.
No, but going forward, it's a
yeah.
contemplation for
Sure.
that same fund,
For sure.
right? So,
Yep.
I mean, isn't that where we pay the upfitting from now?
Yes.
Yes, so, and that's what I'm saying, is going forward, we have to solve this in 17 cars now. But every year we replace a few, assuming you can get cars. I mean, we're now placing early orders because it's hard to get them from the manufacturers. But when they send that car to have all the equipment installed, all of the technology that it takes to operate from that car, that should be part of that car. And if the old stuff is able to be moved from car to car, that's awesome. But if we find that it's not functional and it can't be, then, if we have to buy one, it's easier here and there to buy 1 or 2 than 17. So much like radio replacements, we did a bunch of portable radios at one point where we had to do them 20 at a time. This is the same thing. I mean, now we've got a problem to solve, but I think going forward, we could prevent a recurrence, I feel like.
Yeah, and I just, like, my request as it's indicated here is to replace them all.
Right.
And we would take those as part of this plan that are still functioning, and we would try and sell those or auction those off on a municipal site that does that, and then have them all of the same quality and same age. So even from that standpoint, we can forecast what the average life of a radar is and know that it's one big chunk to do that, and that'll have to be something we budget for.
Sure, but it'll be easier to plan for if we kind of know, how many we can
Right.
swap over and how many can't, so. Does anyone have questions for the chief on this at all? Okay, so we'll rank this, we'll email out a score sheet and we'll
Yep.
rank it for next time. And we'll talk about the decision on this one then next time, so.
And then for your next agenda item,
Well, that one's you too.
well, that's my point. I want to introduce Lieutenant Louis Lopes-Rao, and he's our lieutenant that's responsible for our canine program. So
Okay.
that's all him, and be nice to him. I think it's
All
his
right.
first time here
So,
to you.
perfect, we'll be good. So, yes, if you guys want to switch spots, so we can move to item number 5, which is discussion and possible action on sole source purchase of a police service canine and the canine handler's course within the police department. And you'll see we've got a request there from the same kennel and training facility, I think, where our other dogs have come from, right?
One of them, yes.
One of them, yep. So, I guess, do you have anything that you want to talk us through before we throw it out for questions?
Not necessarily. So we have a handler that's going to be retiring in May. He's already put in his announcement. With his retirement, his dog is also of retirement age, so she'll be retiring with him. So we need to replace that dog. We get the money for replacement of the dogs through a local foundation who is specifically set aside for dog replacements. The only portion of that is not for dog replacement is the cost of our training. So that's about $4,000. We have money set aside through our donation program specific for that. So $11,000 would be coming from the Norman Bradfish Foundation, and then $4,000 would be coming from our in-house donation fund, so when we get donations from community members and stuff. So the $15,000 that we need for this dog replacement will be covered through donations. The only thing that wouldn't be covered through that is salary and things like that for the officer
For
while they're
the
there.
training, sure. So, well, and it's, goes without saying that the value that we get as a community from the service of those animals is way more than what the cost of the training of the dog is. So, does anyone have questions at all on this item? If not, is there a motion to approve the item? Motion from Watson, is there a second? Second from Lukens, further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 6 is discussion and possible action on sole source purchasing for a request to perform soil remediation at 2001 North River Drive, previously Wausau Chemical. And so you've got the documentation in your packets for that. It looks like that documentation supports that the same firm has been working on those adjacent sites as well for some time and has amassed a volume of institutional knowledge about those conditions there on the riverfront. So I guess, Eric, if you want to just walk us through the request, anything that you'd like us to know?
Yeah, I think, yeah, this is coming to you as a sole source request to begin the soil remediation at Wausau, the old Wausau Chemical site. GHD has been our environmental consultant on the Superfund site for decades now, and so it makes sense to maintain and, to continue on with the work through them. And they've been working with the EPA and the DNR. They have quarterly calls with them, and they keep us up to date as well on the status of that site. So we'd like to continue on with GHD to begin this process. It'll be a multi-year process, looks like 4 years, possibly even 5. And so for this year, it would be $100,000.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay. And so for this first phase, are we looking at like excavation and soil replacement, or
I think a lot of it might be,
is it mainly testing?
yeah, it looks like a little bit of field investigation,
Sure.
but the actual remediation would actually begin next year.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent. Anyone have questions on that project at all?
I would just add, this
Go
is
ahead.
being funded out of TID 3.
Yep. Okay. Does anyone have questions at all? If not, is there a motion to approve? Motion from Watson, is there a second? Second by Martins. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. That brings us to item 7, discussion and possible action on sole source purchase and budget modification for the City Hall door lock system. You'll see some documentation in the packets on this one from Leo, our facilities person, who has encountered some difficulties with the functions of the electronic and programmable door lock system based on its age and its product support. And so he's been networking with IT to look at changing that over to the systems that are in play over at county.
Yep.
Which would give us some parity there with what's in use around. Does anyone have questions on that item at all?
So
Go ahead.
we did not specify where we were going to fund this from because it was unplanned. I think as Leo described, it's become quite a security issue for us, not only keeping sometimes City Hall open because the doors will just lock randomly during the day, in the evenings at, when meetings are going on, but it also opens can open on an unpredictable fashion where it's a day that we're closed and the doors decide to open.
Sure.
So it really is a security issue. I was working over the weekend on closing out our 23 projects, and we will have funds left over from 23. I don't have all of my work completed, but we did want to get this approved. So it's not on council for this evening. It would be the budget mod would be on the March.
On for 312?
Yes.
Okay.
So if I could have it on the agenda for that day for both finance and council, and we'll have the financing portion
Mechanism
of it.
figured. Okay.
Yes. And it's, time to close out those projects and figure out where we are and do carryovers. So
Okay.
that would make it timely.
So do you want us to revisit it again in the finance meeting, or do you want us to just approve it and forward it to council contingent upon your
It's up
location
to
of the
you.
money?
It's up to you.
I mean, I guess this is pretty straightforward. So if she's going to conduct a review and locate the funds from project savings, as long as we're aware that that's where it's coming from and there's no substantial change, are we okay with approving that contingent upon her review and then let it arrive on 3/12 at council with the funding identified? Or do you want to see it again first? Go ahead, Michael.
I'm okay with approving it here contingent upon a funding source. I think, yeah, this is pretty straightforward. It's not an overwhelming amount of money,
Right.
and it's something that needs to be done, so let's get moving on it.
Okay, Doug?
Yeah, I do have a question. So it says that this would need to be expanded anyway for the lobby remodeling project. Was any of that remodeling project, did that account for any security? Because since it was a security device, did we?
I don't think it was in the budget initially, but I think that when we look at the total cost of replacement, it's the portion that's related to the new security system is very small because it's really just, we're doing one additional door lock. And so that was the part, and a little bit of electrical.
But when we looked at the lobby enclosure and the security for the city hall lobby, that was drafted, I think, with the assumption that the front door locks worked.
Right.
I mean, honestly, I mean, not to be flip, but, you know, that wasn't a problem when we were talking about the other access issues that we had between the lobby and the rest of the building. I guess, Jerry, if we don't bring up, Jerry's our IT director?
Yeah, there's a couple of things, as Mary Ann mentioned, Leo's been having problems with the current system. It's very old. There was, I think, from what I understand, Leo had planned to have Findorf put in the door strike itself, but when they went to talk to the vendor about doing that, they realized that the current system is completely at capacity and there's no room to put in the additional wires. So we'd have to replace this panel. And then that led to this other discussion of, okay, if we ever replace the panel, we have to upgrade to the latest software. Now we might as well look at what our better options are, which is, the city already uses this Omnicast system. That's what all of the cameras are in all of the buildings, the parking ramps. And we're using this module at the city, or at the county, in the courthouse, in the jail, all the North Central Healthcare campus. We're very comfortable with this module.
So their door controls are already on it and it
All their
works?
door controls are already on this system, and it's integrated into the phone system here. It does stuff like if you're in the building when there's a tornado, that system tells our phone system to beep and tell you that there's a tornado. So there's a whole
okay.
bunch of good integration going on.
Nice.
But yeah, so the original plan was just put a couple of door strikes in. When they went to do them, they're like, there's no room in the panel. You have to go buy a panel. Oh, by the way, you need a new version of the software. And that's what
And it was
that's
off
what led
and
us
running
to,
from there.
let's just do this the right way then.
Sure. Okay. Anyone else have questions on that for Jerry? If not, is there a motion to approve that project? And we would approve it contingent upon Mary Ann's review of the 2023 project savings and location of the fund source when it arrives at council on March 12th.
I'll make that motion
Okay.
contingent on funding.
Okay? So there's a motion by Martins. Is there a second? Second by Watson. Further discussion? Doug?
Just to be clear, so the total is 46,000. There was two numbers highlighted here.
I think that's the transfer we need, 46.
Yeah, I think
Am I on the wrong page here?
the systems tech piece is 23, but there's some other stuff that I think that Mary Ann's still working on figuring out. I think you were talking earlier today that you'd get that together for the 12th.
Yes.
The piece that I want to get ordered is the systems tech piece itself. That's about 23,000.
Okay.
Some of the wiring will be done at time and material, so it's possible it could be, $1,000 either way.
For the install in that.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, but there's some other stuff that that Mary Ann's looking at trying to figure out.
Okay.
So
And if that has to do with the integration of the rest of the security project, that would make some sense too, so. Okay, so we'll let them flesh that out for 312. And obviously, we're all going to see that again as council members, so. Correct. So absent any additional discussion, then members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. Then we've got item number 8, which is discussion and possible action on sole source purchase of icebreaker equipment for the Department of Public Works funded from motor pool. And so we have our street supervisor, Dustin Craig, with us if you have questions with him on this. But SISM committee looked at this last month, and they were actually pretty excited to see this piece of equipment make its way to Wausau. We'll recall now this winter, this hasn't been a problem since it's 60 degrees outside, but last winter and the winter before, depending on when snowfall happens and when plowing gets done, we had a large amount of buildup of snow and ice on side streets, and that led to a discussion in SISM about curb-to-curb sanding and plowing and priority plow routes and all sorts of things that we all get complaints from neighborhoods about when things are icy and people are trying to, drive and walk and they're not on the main drags. And so this actually came to us as a way to we looked at the cost of expanded product application in terms of sanding and that from curb to curb. And it was just not a sustainable expense in SISM. It was astounding how much that would actually be in terms of time and materials. So then, when this item came forward, this item actually breaks up that buildup so they can scrape it off with a plow. And once that's done, the energy of the sun is often enough to prevent them needing to apply more product to those same areas. So in SISM, at least, we were inspired by this particular item. And it looks like it's in wider use, maybe out in the west, but not so much here. So their request was that we get one to try this and see how this works on our side streets under the conditions of a normal winter. And of course, the packet contains pictures of it. They went and got some price quotes and things on them. Does anyone have questions on this for Dustin at all? Doug?
Yeah, I know we talked about it at SISM. What are we anticipating taking delivery?
They were talking about 2 months lead time from the time of order to when they'd be able to make delivery. So it would be early summer.
Okay, would we need it on hand that soon, or?
We could delay ordering. I mean, obviously, we're not going to need it till next winter, most likely.
Okay.
But
Which only begs the question, though, I mean, we found that when we delay ordering other things, the price goes up. So, I mean, if we is there a way that if we're going to delay the ordering, I'd like to verify that the price isn't going to be increased?
the current quote I had, they only give you about 60 days, and then the quote would have to change again. They would have to rebid it.
Right. We've had that trouble with other equipment, where we've postponed the order and then found out it's 25% more than we thought. So I guess I worry about that with the delay.
The nature of the question was really where is the funding going to be
Right, and I was
landing?
going to add that after talking to Dustin, this was not included in the motor pool budget. Again, you know, they are not generating sufficient funds to pick up additional purchases. So I could, as part of my project closeout for '23, look for funding for this too.
Okay.
And include that at next meeting.
Okay, because I'd imagine
didn't
that
quite
from
get done
2023, we
over.
must have some significant
Yeah.
savings for street and road plowing and salting, right? I mean, we've had no winter.
Right.
So-
And really, '23 doesn't have that much of the fourth quarter winter
Right.
activity, usually just 1 month.
Right.
But for sure this year.
For sure this
So
year.
we could look at
So
that,
that's
too.
something
That
that
would
we
be
could.
another option.
I mean, it's a road item, so it would make sense that if we had some savings there, that we would maybe apply that towards this is also for the street and road maintenance costs, so. But yes, so with that, if we send this forward, then Mary Ann will do that analysis
For the 12th,
for the,
is it?
for the
Where it is.
3/12 meeting as well.
Okay.
Does anyone have additional questions on that? If not, is there a motion to approve the acquisition of the icebreaker? Motion from Lukens, is there a second? Second by Martins. Members in favor signify by saying aye.
All right.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries as well. Item number 9 is discussion and possible action regarding ARPA funding requests and related budget modification for River Edge Trail Extension. This is the one that you ranked for this week to finish a section of trail, some of which I believe was funded by room tax, and that there was some grant funding as well. But there was also an ARPA request that we consider using some ARPA dollars to fill that gap. And, you know, you'll recall though, when we first started to allocate ARPA, one of the things that we were interested in putting ARPA toward was outdoor activity space and things that get people outside in the open air to live an active, healthy lifestyle, and then they're not cooped up in buildings, which when ARPA first came to us, it was in response to COVID-19, where we were asking everyone to, get out and find solitary recreational activities, and that's when we funded things like the skate park and a number of things that promote that type of activity. This is similar along those lines. And did you distribute the score sheets, Marianne, the score totals?
I emailed them, and then Cody added them to the packet.
Okay, and
So
so
it was about 72.
72 was the
Yeah.
average score? So that's, yes, because with the way we have this on iPad, I can't toggle between
Oh,
the,
I'm sorry.
I can't toggle between the email and this agenda, or I won't be following the agenda anymore. So if the average score is 72, that is actually higher.
Right.
Than what we've seen with some other projects that we've stuck a pin in. I guess, how do you guys feel about push this project forward? I know coming down the line here, we have an item to look at the progress of the ARPA allocations because there's spend down timelines that we're going to run up against soon enough that if some of these projects don't take flight, we're going to have to reallocate other money as well. So, Sarah?
I mean, I think it says it's a 74.5 average score, which is pretty good. And I think it's it's ready.
Yep.
And it's something that connects the city. So I think I would make a motion
To approve?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion from Watson to approve the ARPA funding, second by Lukens go ahead, Carol, with a comment. Yep.
Thank you. I was excited about this project because I think it's good as far as, helping people get outside and also the area that it's in. I'm glad that is being, developed more. So, yeah, I'm very much in favor of it.
Okay, I think, too, it'll bring a positive to the neighborhood that it sits in. So with a motion and a second on the floor then to fund that trail segment with ARPA, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries as well. Item number 10 is discussion and possible action regarding ARPA funding requests and related budget modification for Catholic Charities. And so you'll see in your packet, previously, we approved ARPA funding basically to stand up the 24-hour, 12-month of the year sheltering and day center with Catholic Charities for approximately 2 years, at which time they'll begin to locate alternative fund sources. During that time, we also had some struggles with keeping the day center, or getting it open, keeping it open. There was some change in management over at Open Door. And then we also had some struggles in getting the contract finalized between Open Door, Catholic Charities, and us for the purpose of funding. And then they also had some leadership changeover, at least on 2 occasions, over at Catholic Charities, which has now stabilized, and the day center is now open. That said, they've submitted expenses, though, for some of the services that were provided in operating that facility during the time that a lot of the situation was in flux. And so Marianne's memo indicates that for ARPA funding, that contract has to have been in place and final before we could expend those ARPA funds. So her proposal to cover the invoices during the period that the contract was in development would be to do a budget mod to fund those bills from the interest that's been earned on the ARPA funds that have been sitting waiting for spend down. The interest income is not subject to those same rules, and that would allow us to then either allocate the remaining ARPA to lengthen that project or divert it to other ARPA-worthy causes. So I guess, does anyone have any questions for her on that? And we also have Tammy in the back of the room who's been managing the review of the expenses that have been submitted by the Day Center and Catholic Charities for appropriateness. And it sounds like these are recommended for payment, that these services were rendered.
And
Go ahead.
we met with Catholic Charities this morning. We would like to add, because the Day Center contract didn't get signed until February, the very beginning of February, and they started providing services in January and had some startup costs. So we'd like to add those costs. They're still finalizing their January costs, but I think if we said $240,000 up from the $225,000, again, all of that then would save ARPA funds for other spending, so.
Sure.
It's really just changing the revenue source or the financing source for these expenses.
Okay. Well, and obviously, the community, the population that needs help is getting the help, and I think that's what our intent was to start with. So this would keep that going. I guess if anyone has any additional questions? If not, is there a motion to approve that budget mod and fund those requests?
And then this would go to March 10th, or March 12th,
as
council
well?
for consideration.
So we'll have a lot of items on March 12th.
Yeah.
So is there a motion to approve? Motion from Martins, is there a second? Second by Watson. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries as well. And item 11 is discussion and possible action on ARPA ongoing allocation monitoring and future allocations and budget modifications. So if you'll recall, a couple meetings ago, we had talked with Marianne about just kind of taking stock of where all of the departments are at with their approved projects. Because a lot of these things, if they're not well underway or ready to take flight pretty soon, we're going to have spend down deadlines that are not going to get met or may not be met. And if that's the case, the last thing we want to do is return our ARPA funds to Washington. So we've asked the departments, I guess, to take a stock of where they're at with things, and you see those in the packets. There are a number of projects that are underway and spending down, but there are some that have not yet been able to. It does look like some of the affordable housing projects have been a challenge. If we can't get, either a replacement project for the one they proposed on Wyatt Street that didn't go, or an alternative project pretty soon, we may have to then reevaluate those approvals and look at our list of unfunded things and allow for additional ARPA requests to be submitted from within the departments, I guess. Does anyone have any questions on that spreadsheet at all?
My intention would be to update this every month then.
Yes.
And I think as the committee, my recommendation would be at some point you have a plan that you are going to implement that gives us enough time to commit the funds for something. And, maybe at a meeting have discussions of, well, what do you think that would be?
Right.
Because, when we look at CIP, for example, if we were to use CIP, we've been, the last CIP, we were like, oh, this roof needs replacing, but we don't have funds. Roofs are very essential to the long-term integrity on buildings. That might be something that you would want to check off your list. Obviously, streets and the condition of our roads are, high on our residents' minds. And that might be something that, we could do asphalt overlay projects relatively easy and get contracts signed for those.
Yep.
So that they could be conducted the next year. But, it's really the
We've-
council's
Yes, and we've had
decision of how
also
you want to commit these funds.
previously scored items that we've kind of put a pin in to wait, that we've unfunded or not funded, I guess, at this point. So that list also could come back under review. And we could also request either substitute or replacing projects from within the departments if there's stuff that's ready to go. It is amazing to me how long some of this stuff has taken from the time we started to approve these 2 years ago. So, this is just a point in time, like a snapshot of where we're at, but, we have a lot of money that the departments need to get going on a spend down. Quite frankly, I'm shocked that the skate park isn't open. That's been a long, long time coming, and I know that we had a public design component of that, but I've actually received complaints from 2 residents that wonder why we can fund these things with good intentions, and then, when it comes time to open them, it's not happening. So, I'm sure that keeping track of this is going to be key for us. And if we find that there's projects that are not underway, that don't have contracts in place to comply with the ARPA requirements, it's going to be incumbent upon us soon. And I guess I'd look for some guidance from Marianne for when that deadline should come. But I feel like we should not get through the entire summer. The summer is our work time. This is when projects get done, when the weather is good. If we get through the entire summer and we have not made significant progress, I feel like then as a committee, we have really cause for concern. Doug?
Yeah, I have a question on that vein. So for example, the infill on new construction, it looks like we're waiting for some additional things to happen. do we have a deadline? Do we have a drop dead before we go to this Plan B? And I guess I'm reluctant to approve this for continuation with, it says here, seek out other properties. So it looks like we're already leaning for, and I applaud looking at other plans, but I don't want to abandon this one because we've identified this as a priority. So what is the trigger mechanism here for when we bring back a Plan B? And I'm reluctant to look at that. We haven't really fleshed those out yet.
Well, and I agree with you. I think when we start to look for those projects, whether it be infill or whether it be affordable housing, I don't think any of us thought at the outset when we were trying to fund this with good intentions that the number one fight we would have was within our own governing body about zoning. And so, I mean, we've allowed a couple of really good projects to go away over the complaint of 3 neighbors. So, I think that puts Tammy and Liz in a rough spot, for getting the stuff created and then now finding an alternate. And I think one of the site considerations they're going to probably have going forward, based on the past experience, is going to be sites that are zoned for what they're trying to do already.
Well, the one in question is we're still awaiting for determination on the grant application, so this should not have a zoning issue. So that's the one I'm concerned with. When are we going to know that we are going to have to abandon this for other options that we have yet to be really fleshed out for us?
I know Tammy's
Do
here,
we,
Liz.
do we know,
isn't-
Tammy? Come on up and walk us through a little bit of when we might know on the other fund source.
I wish I had a great answer for you. Liz has been in contact with the DNR, and they don't have an answer as to why they haven't made a decision. Initially, they told her that they thought this was an easy award, and it would only take 90 days. Here we are, still waiting. That's why we're looking at Plan B and have identified these other lots. We've actually have an RFP ready to go for these other 3 lots because we need to get moving on something. And, excuse me, I mean, we do not plan on just not doing anything on Thomas Street, but we need to do it correctly.
And I would agree, and I applaud you for looking at options and Plan Bs, but I think it should come back to this body, and there should be community engagement, there should be other considerations before we just release it with a contingency, unless that's the desire of the body. But I think we owe it to try to run that one to ground before we switch.
The original project, the RFP process started out in economic development, right? In the committee. So I'm assuming if we would have to change course, we'd go back there. We wouldn't handle that here. I mean, we'll handle the money part, but as far as what happens with the site and what Plan B, where it starts, I feel like it should start there,
And that's what
right?
our plan was, yes.
Okay, that makes
Okay.
sense.
Okay, so, that clarifies it, so that's not an approval contingent on whichever way that the department needs to take it. It's going to come back to this.
Right. I think if it becomes a Plan B, it basically becomes a do-over, and then we start the whole committee process again, right? So,
With the ARPA request, we really didn't identify which particular lots we were going to do.
okay.
But we did, through the process, identify Thomas Street because that's what the council wanted us to do. So that's why we tried to do that. We have no problem holding tight to see if we can get that grant, but we also know that even if we do, there's going to be a lot of steps because we have to put this out for RFP, for a contractor, for different things. And yes, the construction doesn't have to start this year, but we have to have contracts
Contracts.
signed. So the question is, how long do you want us to wait versus let's get the ball moving? So we want to be very cognizant of all that.
I think this would be a bid situation too, not an RFP, because it's.
Oh, I'm sorry, bid, yes,
Yeah.
it is, yes.
Right, so
Correct.
then we would have a bid window too, where
Correct,
we'd have to
correct.
comply with and post, so.
Correct.
Okay, so that makes some sense. So this, we don't have to act on this list, this is just an FYI type list, and I think that it's a good idea now, we're to the point where we should probably have this spreadsheet on as a standing agenda item, that we just
Yes.
give it a quick review every month, so that we can see that progress happening, and if we're not seeing that progress and that spend down, then we'll have to get with the departments and find out like where we're going, so. Hi, Tom. Welcome.
Hi, nice to see you. Yes, so my colleague's question about drop dead dates on things, when would the actual objective date be on that?
So we need to have all of our contracts in place by December 31st of 2024. So in my mind, if we're going to be looking for alternates, we should probably give ourselves, like, everything should be pretty much in by the end of August, so that if we have funds left over, we can, commit that between September 1 and December 31st. I attended a finance directors meeting with the league, and I was asking other communities how they were going to protect their spending, and really nobody, us accountants were kind of introverts. Nobody really talks at those meetings. It's so frustrating sometimes, actually. But no one had any ideas. One of the things that I had thought of is if we have projects like asphalt overlay, for example, if we bid out even the 2024 project and said if we had leftover funds, we would be using it for that project, it would be then committed, the contract would be signed. If we only have $1 left over, we could apply it to it. If we ended up with $75,000 left, we would be able to apply it to that project because the contract would be in hand. We designated ARPA funds. So I guess that's what I was trying to think of, projects that would be easy
So,
to get a contract in place in that last fourth quarter.
Contracts by the end of this year we
Yes.
need. Yes, that's the objective,
Okay.
factual answer, I suppose. Okay, well, a couple of things. So my understanding, I did contact the DNR as well, and there was a look into if there were any updates and so forth. One of DNR staff had forwarded me an email, I think from a couple months ago, and my understanding from the call, although I don't think I received an update, for the present time, there was some thought that could be potentially, they were thinking before potentially February or March. Yes, fact number two. And then let's look at the park and what we were told by REI just a few weeks ago. They didn't want to do further testing in the winter because they said that really wasn't the conducive season to doing that. So I really don't see what the problematic time frame is at this point if testing wasn't really going to commence during the winter time anyway. So I'd like to see if this does indeed fall into place from the department in March, or if it takes longer than that. But at this point, it does not sound like a real objective concern in terms of time frame. But yes, my understanding is that decision still needs to be made. It may be coming up sooner or later. I don't think we know, but I think we should continue to interact with the DNR to get updates. And also, another reason that I had some concern was not about the DNR, that grant. It was when I was at a public input session at Riverside Park for Thomas Street, a city staff member told me that the sentiments were so strong about some of the staff not approving the Wyatt zoning that at least one member of the finance committee in a retaliatory fashion was looking to derail the Thomas Street project because of that Wyatt Street decision. Now, I thought, hey, that sounds so inappropriate, it can't be true, and maybe it's not. That's what I was told, and I was not the only party to that conversation. So I think what I'd like to see is the district alderperson, as we take objective, factual steps in seeing what the time frame's going to be from the DNR, if they know in the near future. Ms. Grote's already laid out what the time constraints may be. And hey, if in a just factual world it wouldn't work out, it wouldn't work out, but let's just make sure it's not from some city hall baloney, because that neighborhood's already been through enough of that. So if we could please just pursue this in a good faith, factual fashion, I think that would be the best for our people. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's the last item on our agenda then.
I think the one thing
Oh,
that
go
we had
ahead.
wanted to talk, I was just looking for my agenda here, hold on one second. Because did we have, Oh, yeah, and budget modification. So there was one other item where Eric had outlined all of the projects that he's been managing, and, you know, some of the projects had money left over, some of the projects are a little short. And we, you know, we're interested to see if you wanted to fund those shortfalls. He has $266,000 of additional money he needs, but he has about 581,000 left.
Of savings from the other stuff?
Yes, so in the projects that he was specifically interested in was the Able Stormwater Lift Station. Looks like it's running about 100,000 short. The lead service line replacement plan, about $17,000 short. It looks like the Henrietta project is a little over 9,000 short, and then the sewer lift station upgrade design was 140 short.
So we have 581 left in savings, and he's got needs of 266, so
Yeah.
about half.
So 315 would be left
Yep.
after you reallocated to finish. Really, it's
Right.
not a change in scope, it's just the funding, the
Right.
budget was short.
Well, and our goal when we earmarked these funds was to finish these projects. So does it not seem like we should allow for that shift, get the work done that's on the work list, and then that other 315, that we'll have to take requests for, or figure
Right.
out other things that we can do to get more work done with the same dollars, I guess, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll need to act on that. Is there a motion then to complete a budget mod to true up the ARPA projects, to shift around the funding from the savings in some project areas to the deficiencies in others, for approximately $266,000? That would allow the remaining work to get completed.
So really, your question there, if I may, Mary Ann, so we're really moving money around within a department.
Right.
As the modification, we're not increasing the
Right,
budget.
so like
Yeah.
the two big projects that had funds left over were the water main the 23 water main replacement and sewer main replacements came in under budget.
Right.
And so it would be allocating those funds to these other projects that are underway but are going to run short.
But all of them are ARPA funding.
But
That
they're
we-
all ARPA funded, yes.
So we move ARPA from one project to another to
Yes.
finish them all. If that,
On balance, I don't have a problem with that. I would say, I'd move to approve that.
okay, so we have a motion to approve that shift in the budget. Is there a second? Second by Lukens. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed, so that motion carries. And then the remaining dollars from those project savings, we certainly can, as part of our monthly review, take a look at that.
Yes, so I'll update that and have that ready for the March
Yep.
12th meeting.
Yep, and if there's requests that are coming in the meantime for additional projects from the departments, or to the departments from within the community, we would probably want to get going on scoring that stuff sooner than later. So, with that, that's the end of our agenda items, so I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion by Watson, second by Dinny. Members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? No one's ever opposed. We'll stand adjourned then and make way for the committee of the whole in 7 minutes. Thanks, everyone.